Welcome to this webinar about food labeling for retail packaging. This is a very basic labeling webinar. Um, the labeling laws are very extensive, and this webinar is by no means meant to tackle all the different cases. So we're going to go with just the basic, like I said, for someone who is just starting out and they want to get their product out, they don't know how, or someone who has done their labeling the first couple of times, but they're not too sure if they have all the right information in there. The food labeling laws are a little bit complex, but there are some very key information if that you need to make sure you have, um, and my rule of thumb is always to just keep it simple, at least at the beginning. If you don't want to deal with lawyers um, and regulators, just keep it simple, because the goal of the food label is to provide information about the product, attract and protect consumers, and meet regulatory requirements. So those are pretty basic goals. Information about your product can be about certain claims that you want to make. For example, if you want to say your product is fat-free, um, nutrient contents, this product has X amount of vitamin C, any additives that you may or may not have in the product, and also provide information about plant-based. So the other goal of your packaging is to make sure it attract and protect consumers. This webinar is not going to go into details about branding, but it's very important that you work with someone in marketing or branding to make sure your package is going to help sell your product. I mean, you want the package to be clean and easy to read. Make sure it stands out, color is right, the content is appropriate, the images are targeted to the right audience, and it's easy to use. You don't want to have a package that so difficult that people have to go out of their way, get scissors or try to open it, but it's so poorly designed that all the content of the package spill all over the kitchen counter, the floor. This will create a very negative experience about your product, which has nothing to do with how good your product is. Tamper resistant, you also don't want random people to just get your product and switch the content. So you want to have something that is not easily removable, or that people cannot remove and put back. And last but not least, you want your package to be able to ensure safety. And I know this was put at the bottom, but it's by no way mean the least important on this slide. You don't want to get anyone sick because your package did not protect the product and ensure safety. You want to be able to meet regulatory requirements, and that's very important. Labeling rules vary depending on the products that you are working with. There are products that are FDA regulated. There are products that are USDA regulated, and then there's a category under FDA regulated product, also called supplement, and another one for pet food. So you want to be sure your food product is correctly labeled. And I see this quite often. Sometimes people don't know whether or not a particular product is a food or a supplement, and that can create confusion because those two rules are very different. This webinar is really going to focus on FDA regulated food for adult, and not so much for children under 4, because children under 4 will have a slightly different nutrition fact panel. But other than that, the rules are pretty much the same. We now enter into what is mandatory on a food label. I mean, some packaging are very crowded, and we won't have time to really go through what makes some packages very, very crowded. So we will stick with the very simple parts of a label. Here we have the name and identity of the product, and it needs to be in English using common terms. If you have a product from a different country that has a name that everybody from that country knows, if you're going to sell it in the US, you have to make sure there is a common name for it. And common name are names that everybody knows. The next section of a label needs to be the net weight, or also called quantity statement. And it has a specific format. So if your product is liquid, it will have one format. If your product is solid, it will have a different format. So make sure you know which format to use. There's the ingredient list, the allergen information, which is very important these days, nutrition labeling. There are some exemptions that apply. Make sure there is a business contact information on that label, the best by date or code or lot code number. This is very important for traceability. Country of origin, if your product is from a different country, or if you're using mostly ingredients from a different country that are not really super processed. So the most common example is like you buy a bag of flour from, let's say Canada, and then you repack that flour into like smaller packs, and but you didn't really transform this product, and in this case you will have to put the country of origin, which would be in this case Canada. And as another part of the label, you want to make sure you have a UPC. It is not it is not something that the FDA requires, but it's something that is very important to retailers. Okay, so for the name of the food, so the common name is very simple for many products. I mean, rice is rice. So if you're having difficulty with a product and you can't really say whether or not this product is, you know, a juice um, or, or, or rice or milk. You know, you can get help. Uh, it needs to be in bold, and it needs to be on the consumer facing part of your packaging. So that's what the FDA called the principal display panel. It needs to be in the most prominent words printed on the principal display panel, or at least have the size of the largest print. So if you're gonna have like this, your brand name like in this big font and size, you want to make sure that the name of the product is at least half the size of that largest print. And then don't use artwork to hide information. You don't want to do that. If there are things on your label that you don't think are really attractive to certain consumer, I think it's it's best to let them know. And if they're not gonna buy it, then they don't buy it. But these days, you really don't want to trick people into buying your product and have them get upset later on and go on social media and blast um, your product. So that's probably more damaging than either not selling the product or trying to hide information on the pack. The net weight and quantity statement. So what is the net weight? The net weight is the weight of the product without any of the packaging. And it needs to be on the principal display panel, visible to consumers who are purchasing your product online or on the shelf. It needs to be at the bottom 30% of the label. It should be clear and concise, and it should be in the format net weight, whatever your ounce um, weight is, and in parentheses the amount in gram. And then for beverages, it would be in ml, and then in parentheses fluid ounces. The ingredient list is super important. I mean, we live in communities where people have all sort of allergies, and you want to be able to be familiar with those allergens, so when you have to write down the ingredients from your label, you can do so confidently. Um, as a reminder, the top 9 allergens in the US are milk, eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybeans, and sesame. Now, if a product contains allergens, there should be a content section on there. If you manufacturing product in a facility that handle those allergen, and sometimes even if your product doesn't contain a specific allergen, um, I've seen a lot of company put manufactured in a facility that also process, whatever allergen um, is also used in that facility. And the FDA doesn't really like that. But as a consumer, especially if I have a very sensitive allergy to something, I feel like I would rather know, whether I'm exposed. So that's going to be a decision, to take um, with your legal team, but a regulatory team. Um, but I wanted to make sure, you give big importance to this section. This is This is probably one of the most important piece of information you're going to put on your label, because for several years now, the number one cause of recall, of food recalls in the United States, um, has been because of allergens. It's the most common. Uh, I'm not saying it's been the most financially uh, draining, but it's the most common cause of recall. So make sure you know the allergens, what they are, and if you have them in your facility, make sure you don't go into um, a situation where you're putting product in a bag, but not declaring the allergens properly. The nutrition facts. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of exceptions about whether or not you need to put a nutrition facts on your label. There are a lot of products that don't need to have a nutrition facts. So if you're producing coffee, certain spices, I say certain spices because uh, if you're doing a spice blend that has salt, sugar, or something that is not spice, you are in a different category. Um, but but usually the basic coffee, tea, um, you know, they're exempt. Um, Small suppliers producing less than 100,000 units are also exempt. Low volume products that bear nutrition claims don't qualify for exemption. So, which means even if you're selling two units, and but you are making a claim about something that your product has or doesn't have, um, you will have to put a nutrition fact so people can see, okay, well, you just said that your product is fat free. Well, I have to see the nutrition fact to see if it's really fat free. uh, your business contact information, the name and address of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. So um, if you've paid attention to labeling, you've seen that certain packaging have distributed by, others have manufactured by. So if you are yourself producing the product, so it's manufactured by. If you are using a co-packer or someone else's product but repacking, it's usually distributed by. Country of origin, it needs to be ideally placed under the ingredient list, and it should be of the format product of. You need country of origin if you're repacking, um, if you are purchased product from a different country and has not changed the format of the original product. Earlier, I gave the example of flour. If you buy flour, if you buy 50 pounds flour from Canada and then you bring it to the U.S. and then you put it in a 1 pound bag and you sell it at retail, you have to put the product of origin on the label in this case. But if you buy your flour from Canada and then you ended up making cake with it and now you're selling the cake, then you no longer have to put the country of origin on this item. Claims. My rule of thumb is to only put claims on your product if you have done like lab testing or the proper testing. Um, for example, fat free. I mean, you may think your product is fat free because you didn't add any fat in it, um, but that may or may not be the case. Some ingredients have little amount of fat, and depending on how much of that product you have, or how much of that ingredient you have in your product, it may not be fat free. So we don't know. So to be certain before you use a claim, make sure you have the proper testing done. Um, no claims about, oh, your product can cure disease. This is a big no, big flag that will get your product off the shelves very fast. Um, Not in a good way. Um, Claims, again, you got to make sure you have the right authority, the right data and information to make your claims. So for organic product, you can't just say my product is organic. You got to make sure that um, there has been some sort of certification process that has confirmed that this product is organic, because sometimes a lot of those claims can lead to multiple complex ideas. So so you want to be really certain of what you're doing or what you're saying, and what you're putting on your packaging. Any claims made about nutrients, like I said earlier, it will require a nutrition fact. Um, Non-GMO claim, again, that's also another one. If you're not sure if your product is non-GMO, ask or send it out for testing, because a lot of time one product can be made from a non-GMO source and another product is not, and they're identical. So you can just see, you can just expect to visually determine whether a product is non-GMO. Uh, so again, be very careful with claims. Best buy a lot number. This is, I'll say, it has to be mandatory for a food plant, or a food item. You want to have a way to trace back your product. You want to know what you put out, um, and how it ties up to your raw material in case there's something happen. If in case you you produce a batch, there's some color issues, you want to be able to trace back those individual items to um, to the source, so you can come up with a solution of what happened. Any additional information that is not required by the FDA is considered intervening material. So make sure all the information that are required by the FDA are clear and visible, and there's nothing that's hiding them. So where do you get the information to put on the label? I've been working in the food business for over 20 years. I enjoy bringing help to food entrepreneurs, and I'm very concerned sometimes when people spend a lot of money to launch their food business, but they have very little knowledge about certain very important details in the business. So your nutrition fact, you can have it done for relatively like small amount of money if you are making certain product. Like baking is is very popular. So um, there are baking losses that you need to account for. Um, there are other products that are more straightforward. Sometimes juice is very easy to have an affordable nutrition facts made. For some other item, it's more complicated. You have to send your product out to the lab for testing. And in the best of the world, I will say, regardless of the product, at one point in time, you should send it out to a lab for nutritional testing, because that's really when you know exactly what's in your product, instead of using a database that compares what's in your product to what's on the market in general. Shelf life. Again, some product are easy to um, to sell. They are shelf stable. Other products have a lot of moisture, and you may not know how long this product can last without spoiling. And when I say without spoiling, it's not like when, when you can see that the product is visibly spoiled. At this point, it's really, really too late. You have to be able to go a little bit, like, um, back a little bit. You have to be able to um, backtrack the amount of time it will take your product to have the the same taste or the same um, specification as when the product was made. So in other words, if if you make your cake and on day one the cake is like super soft, super moist, super tasty, um, 3 days later it's a little dry, it's, you know, it's not as interesting. That cake probably only has a 1 day or a 2 day shelf life. You know, you want the experience for your consumer to be about the same as on the first day. You definitely don't want your shelf life to go to the point where um, you know, your cake has turned into rock, or you know, there are visible signs of mold in there. And the best way to do that is really to send your product out for shelf life testing and see how the microbes grow in there. And in some cases, you may have to add some sort of preservatives, whether it's natural or artificial, to make sure it lasts as long as you want it to. Um, then there are microbial tests, chemical tests, pesticide tests, gluten tests, and allergen tests, and all of those are, you know, super important. Um, for nutrition facts, you can generate it using a nutrient database. Some of them are available online. Um, you can do it the very old-fashioned way with an Excel spreadsheet, you know, where you have all the nutrients, and you do a lot of calculation. But this is really um, time consuming. You can send your product to a lab, which is, like I said, the most accurate, but it's also the most costly. Um, you can find out about your serving size. This is very important. There's a table that the FDA provides that helps with making sure you know your serving size. And then once you know your serving size, you can find your serving per container. So to generate your nutrition facts, you can use a standalone label, you can use an online software, you can do it yourself, you can hire a consultant. I myself have some link that I've used, and if you want to use some of those, I can send them to you as well. If you have any additional information that you would like, please feel free to contact us at foodlabel@nutritionfactslabelgenerator.com. Thank you so much for your time.